First of all, thanks everyone for being here. Appreciate the coverage all year. I know it's been, a little bit of an up and down season, but overall I thought we finished on quite a strong note. Saw a lot of the prospects that we've been excited about for quite some time that hasn't necessarily been seen at the NHL level, but I think some of them got some nice run and were quite impressive in doing so. And so a lot of optimism heading into the offseason and into next season. And then, just appreciate everyone's coverage. Thought very fair in bringing the stories and the news around our team to the fans. So with that, I'll answer questions.
Just, I know you're going to have a busy offseason, but just want to ask you first of all about the job that Anders did in his time up here and just your evaluation of him.
Yeah, I thought he did a really nice job. It was a tough spot to come into. A little bit of a team that was obviously struggling, which is why we made the coaching change, but also a team in transition.
Mm-hmm.
We're transitioning. We had an extremely veteran roster at the start of the year. It didn't click. It didn't work. And as we went on in the season, there was a transition to much younger players and a younger roster and giving some exposure and experience to some younger players. And so that transition in itself is not easy, for any team, but or any coach, but especially for one that's coming in partway through and has to deal with that and coach through that. And so that's something that I think he did quite well. And I think towards the end we saw some ups and downs in his time as the coach over the last year. But I think the one thing is we really finished off strong. We the young players in particular seemed to really find their footing towards the end, and that's a credit to him. I thought he did a really nice job in a tough spot.
With Connor Bedard, he talked about his growth this season. Where did you see the growth in everything from this year?
Yeah, no, I think, just some more of the nuances of the game, the things that will lean on him as someone that's going to play a lot of minutes and some important minutes is, your face-offs, some of the defensive aspects of the game. And again, he's 19, he's got room and areas to grow in, and I believe he truly understands that, and he's excited to attack that. But no, I think some of those more nuanced part of the games, I think we saw some nice progress from him, and I'm sure he'd like his production to be higher and all of that. But for his point in his career, I think we're he's done an incredible job. Not only handling the on ice but the off ice, and then also producing and playing some good hockey while still only 19 years of age.
How do you think you handled all the challenges of the season, both professionally and personally? Family addition, new free agents, bringing up prospects.
Mm-hmm.
In one case, somebody wanted to be off the team. Just
Yep.
like everything in total, how you think you balanced it all in your performance in that?
Yeah, you're right. It was a challenging season for myself. And mostly, I would say that's mostly away from the rink, and not challenging in a negative way, so to speak. Just, busy, new child, heart surgery, and going through that whole situation where feeling the way I was feeling, finding out the news, going through the process of, second, third opinions and doing that all while, in between work, right? And so that's not easy. I didn't hope that was, I didn't have heart surgery on my bingo card this year. But you meet those challenges and you overcome them, and we got through it, and I feel great now. From a personal and health, physical standpoint, I look forward to feel like getting back into shape that I like to be in. I just, whether it be the heart or work, you go through these periods where that, either being in shape or working out, that gets put on the back burner, or, family takes up a lot of the time too. And so I'm looking forward to some time to, kind of taking care of myself a little bit and being with the family. From a work standpoint, this is a challenging job. It doesn't matter what year. There's going to be curveballs and grenades and ups and downs, and whatever you have to deal with, they're going to come your way. And I don't think that's any different than any other year. There's things you have to deal with and overcome, and I think as a group we did quite well in that. it's all part of our growth and maturation as a organization, as a team, in this rebuild. And so that's going to happen. You're gonna go through those things, and I feel at the end of the day, standing here now, that we feel like we're in a good spot moving forward. I don't know how, sitting in my seat, I can't be optimistic about where we're headed given what we saw towards the back part of the season.
Have you put any thought into what a coaching search looks like for you from here on out?
Oh yeah, we've thought about that quite a bit. I don't know how slow or fast. I think it's just kind of getting a feel for different candidates and different people we'll want to talk to, and make sure we feel good, and when the right when we feel like we're in a good spot, then we'll see who that next head coach is, whether it's Anders or an external candidate. And so, but yeah, no, someone we think about all the time and talk about quite a bit. And so, excited to dig into that.
Is there a specific type of coach where I'm sure Luke made a lot of sense for where you were at the rebuild of that phase? Is what you're looking for in a coach any different now for this next phase?
I think there are differences, but I don't know if even going through the process of thinking through what that looks like, and I came to the somewhat of an understanding or realization is that we can't put a box on what a candidate needs to look like and then just go with that, because I think you're limiting yourself to a very, very small number of people if that's the case. And so I think we're going to remain open-minded about things and where we want to go, and who could fit, whether it's internal or external. And so that's I don't necessarily think we're just going to look at something different from Luke because we were in a potentially different spot. I think we are in a different spot, but that doesn't mean that we're going to pigeonhole ourselves into just looking for one specific thing or one specific type of candidate.
Have you interviewed anybody for the job yet, or do you have any interviews scheduled?
I won't get into process, but no, there's been no interviews. To this point, it's something that we wanted to wait until the off season. I think the person that's probably got the most close to on the job, formal interview has been Anders, right? And so we've been in the mix with him every day, and we've known him for quite some time. But that's something we're gonna do, moving forward. But no, nothing. We wanted to get through the season, and so nothing that we've been sitting down with people formally or anything like that.
Do you have a timeline of when you would like to have
New
coach in place?
Yeah, not necessarily, but going back again, we've done this process before, and I remember I was calling around for permissions on candidates at the combine, and that's too far down the road for me. I'd like to get a much quicker start than I did last time around. I believe last time we said we wanted to get it right, but ideally around the draft free agency, and certainly want something before then. But you don't get to pick your timeline. You have to, if the right candidate comes along sooner, then that's fine. If they come along later in the process and down weeks, months, then that's how it plays out. Can't pinpoint that. So
How much do you weigh the importance of actual NHL head coaching experience as you look at the search, given the last few haven't worked out and were first-time coaches?
Yeah, that's something we've discussed a lot, and the value of that. And I believe there is value in that, but what we've probably come to the conclusion on is it's not the end all be all. It's certainly a feather in a candidate's cap, and you can't deny that type of experience, and that they've traveled that road before, and there's something of value there, but it's not necessarily something that we would consider mandatory if another candidate didn't have that but felt like a good fit for us. So again, it's something that is certainly a value. We see the value in that, but and the next head coach could very well have significant experience, or they might not, right? So it's not something that we're going to use as a filter to rule people in or out with. So.
I know you guys think highly of Anders, but if he doesn't get the permanent job, is it on the table that he can go back to Rockford and continue to groom those players that he's been working closely with, or do you see value in keeping him in the NHL working with some of the guys here, however that might play out?
Yeah, I think, I don't know what the future is going to hold. I don't know, where it's going to go, and I don't want to disqualify him in talking about any other roles. I think the one thing I will say is we have we hold great value in Anders, and if the coaching search doesn't go in his favor, he's going to be a part of our organization. We want him as part of the organization no matter what. And so, right now that's under consideration as the head coach. And then, anything after that we'll figure out until then. But right now he's a candidate for our head coaching position. And but we love Anders. He's been part of the organization for some time. He's a great hockey mind. He's a great person, and those are the type of people we want in our organization.
How different is your approach to this summer now that you've got these young guys coming up? The last couple summers it's been, shorter term veterans with a purpose.
Mm-hmm.
But now that you've seen these young guys come up, how does that shift your focus both around maybe free agency and trades, but also the draft?
I don't necessarily know if it changes much. We were always we ended up with shorter term contracts, but that wasn't necessarily like, okay, this is only what we're going to do. We're very open to everything that's out there, whether it be trade, free agent. In the past, it just happened that we signed the types of contracts that we did, and that's the direction we went down. And I don't think that'll be any different this summer. We're going to consider everything that is available to us once we know what's available to us. It's probably a couple months or so down the road before we really get a sense of what teams are looking to do in the off season. We'll have to wait until July until we hear or see who's actually available on the free agent market. But so that's a can that's kicked even further down the road. But we've never been closed off or avoidant of any, whether it be, we haven't done any long-term deals for people outside of our organization. So it's not like we've been avoiding that. It just hasn't worked out that that's made sense for us. And so, we're going to evaluate everything that comes our way. I know I've said that a lot over the last couple of years, but that's just what we do. That's the job. And, it's everyone else's job to put, ideas thrown at us and around our team. But there's a reality of, acquisition and how that actually looks and the odds of things actually happening, that's what we have to deal with. And, I think what my focus is what I know. And I know we've got a lot of young, really high upside quality players here. And for the most part, and how we've built this is that our growth and our development and how good we're going to be is going to come from those players. And, we would have taken a different road if we wanted to build this through another means, whether it be, trade, free agency, that's a little bit of a different path, and we're not opposed to those at all. But the grand, the upside here is going to be found through the players that are coming up through our system and that a lot of people have seen on our NHL roster in the year. So, but that doesn't mean you're not open to adding. We certainly are. It just has to make sense. And, there's a lot of teams that I hear, their media or them are saying a lot of the same things as we're looking to add. And, you're just one of 32 and everyone else is sort of looking at the same stuff in the same player pool as you. And so you've got to make sure that your plan and where you're headed is not contingent on something that's super small likelihood of actually happening. We've got to focus on what we know, and that's our players coming up through the system who we feel are, have a ton of promise and have shown quality already. And so, that's our focus right now is that's the team moving forward. And then what comes available that we can add to that. And that's what we'll determine, in the months ahead.
Like last year, last year you knew sort of that you had a lot of spots to fill, and the lineup you had in the season-ended game was, almost everyone's re-signed, and you obviously have a lot of youth, and some guys have already shown maybe they're NHL ready. How do you balance, like all of a sudden you have Rinzel who looks like, maybe he doesn't need time in Rockford, and you have Doc who played well before he was injured, and weighing that with contracts and how much of a balance you have to play into that, and making sure that you're not, blocking those guys' paths soon too.
For sure. We were just in a different spot ending last year. We had holes to fill. We had players that they just weren't ready for the NHL, or they weren't even in pro hockey. And so we had holes to fill, and so we filled them. And I think we're in a little bit of a different spot where we can be, with respect to considering additions, we can be much more selective and specific on what we're looking for rather than needing to fill out a roster. I think we've got young players that we know can play in the NHL and deserve the opportunity to find themselves in the NHL. Now they have to have a good summer and come into camp and earn that, of course. And I think there's going to be competition throughout that young group to determine who is part of that roster into the season. But we're not in a position where we're going to be filling as many holes as last year, where we just have much more of prospect groups that's shown that they can compete at the NHL level and continue their development at the NHL level. And then from targeted parts of the roster that we'll consider. Doesn't mean we're successful in getting anything done, but I think we can be much more specific about what we're looking for.
Bedard will be eligible for an extension in July, and he said that he wants to stay here long term. Have you talked with him about that, or have you thought about kind of the timing for figuring that out?
It's obviously an off-season thing. I don't really talk to him about that. I think everyone knows. It is what it is. Everyone understands where their contracts are, when they're eligible for extension, all that kind of thing. So, we'll get to work on that now that we're in the off season, and we'll see if there's anything to announce this summer. But nothing to report on that.
How would you evaluate his season, and what was your feedback for him? I know he's hoping to work on his speed this summer, but kind of moving forward as well, what was your feedback for him?
Yeah, no, I think we talk quite a bit, and I think we're adding maybe a little step would. I think it is going to make him more dangerous. Open up things for him. Open up things for his line mates. Just give him another option and another way to create offense. Be more effective on defense, stripping pucks, anything. It's going to help. And so I think that's. I was excited to hear his plans for the offseason and the plans he has to grow his game. But overall, I thought Connor had another really strong season, right? Like he's our most productive offensive player, and I think could he shoot more? Yeah, like he's an unselfish guy too, and right, he's trying to set up teammates. But I think in taking a little more, even more charge offensively, especially on the power play, I think that'll open up things for the rest of the team and for himself. And so those are little things that we talked about, but he's figuring it all out. He has a good read on where he sees areas of growth for himself and ways he can impact the game more. And so he's a good self-evaluator, and excited to see how the offseason goes for him and see him come back in the fall.
Ryan Donato.
Sounds like we got the same question.
Ryan Donato said he expressed multiple times how much he wants to be a Blackhawk for the rest of his career. He said he was close, or you guys were close at the deadline. What's been the roadblock to getting that done before the deadline?
Yeah.
And does his 30-goal season put him on a different footing in your mind?
Well, he's definitely going to get a different contract than he got previously. Yeah. But I think it's mutual. It's mutual, but there's a process to those things that takes time, and you want to get it right, both for the team and for the player. And so we had some discussions right before the deadline, and I think just, when you get into a tight time frame, it either happens or it doesn't, and doesn't mean things went sideways. And then we get through the deadline, and now you've got time, right? There's not, we were looking for, perhaps a little clarity with his situation, and just teams were interested, right, around the deadline. And so we did have a little bit of a rapid, discussion around then, and it didn't get done. But I wouldn't say there's a hurdle or anything like that. It was, once you get past the deadline, everyone takes a little break, a little breather, and then you're near the end of the season. So I think things will pick up. Now that we're through the year, I think we'll pick up again very soon.
I know Nick Glarda suffered an injury. Are you able to shed light on the severity of that, or would you prefer it came from Brantford?
Yeah, we just don't have all the information yet.
Got it.
He's getting evaluated right now. I took a tough hit there in their playoffs, but no, I don't really have an update. I just know that I think he's seeing a doctor here in the next couple days, and so hopefully have something on that soon. But hopefully not too bad.
Dominic James, you seem pretty impressed by him. What is the reason why that hasn't come to fruition?
Yeah, you know what? With college players, when they go through their college career, they earn the right to either sign and join your team or explore their other options. And as of right now, it looks like he's going to explore options. He's a great kid, great player. No ill will there. He's getting to know Dom over the last little while, and even going through some injuries in college. He's a first class kid, and so that's just the way it goes sometimes. When they want to explore different options, then you have to respect that when the ability is there for them. Through their exclusive negotiating rights expire on August 15th. So still, door is still very much open with us, and so, but that's up to him to and his representatives to decide the best path for him. And if it's with us or if it's with someone else, we wish him the best of luck. Again, there's no hard feelings there. We think we've got a pretty damn good opportunity here, for a young player, and the willingness that we have to not only develop but give significant playing time to young players. I think that's been shown a lot over the last year or two, and I'm sure will continue to be the case moving forward. But they get one career, and they've got to do what's best for them. And so sure he's working through that right now. But no, nothing but all the best for Dom if he's with us or with another organization. He's a great kid.
I know you're going to hate me asking a draft question this early, but I'm going to ask anyway.
Sure. You can wait until the lottery if you want.
No.
Okay.
I'm going to ask for it. There are a lot of guys that are kind of considered around the same range, about 4 guys, and you have a bunch of defensive prospects already. Would you still consider taking a defensive guy if it was 1 or 2, or does your need at forward kind of factor in?
Would we consider it?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, we would consider it. Where that falls, where our pick is, where we have guys ranked is, we still have the U18 tournament and a bunch of meetings for our scouts to get on the board and arrange our list the way we think that they are ranked. But no, we're going to close off, we're not going to close off any avenue there, right? I think the way I view the draft too is not, it is team building, of course, but you've got one day to acquire the best talent out of a draft. You've got one day. You've got the rest of the time to manipulate a roster, a depth chart, or an organizational, strength or weakness, right? And so our job in the draft is to acquire talent. And, we're not going to close off, we're not going to go position of need necessarily. We've always gone best player available in our minds and what we think could impact the organization the most, and we'll continue to do that and deal with an overload of strength, or if it comes to pass that we're picking in a certain spot and the best player fits what may be an organizational need, then plug them in. But until then, we first of all, we don't know where we're picking, but I also don't really know where the rankings are going to fall. So, but no, I'm not closed off to taking a forward or a defenseman.
You got to tell me who's number
No.
1 here.
I didn't tell you when it was Connor. I'm not telling you this year.
How would you assess Levshinov's development, and do you see him as an NHLer, or how do you kind of gauge where he's at?
Yeah, no, Artie had, I I would say his development was and has been. It's sort of the story of his last couple of years, just rapid development. And you know, I would say it wasn't maybe not the strongest start for him in Rockford, but that's also because of his injury situation, getting any reps in training camp other than by himself, basically no pucks, and then getting thrown into a whole new level of play in pro hockey. And so, you know, there was some assimilation that needed to take place there. But once he got up to speed and got comfortable, I think you saw the confidence in the play take off. And then we brought him up to give him some experience again, because he didn't get that in training camp. No games, no preseason, nothing, you know, but he was playing well enough where it's, okay, he's earned this to get a shot. And it could have been one game, it ended up being the rest of the season. And so I think that's a credit to him, to jumping into another level of hockey that it seems like he's done every couple months and done very well. You know, he's 19. Defensemen are, you know, normally in a tough spot when they have to jump into a higher level of hockey that quickly. But, you know, I think some of the things that he does are you can't teach. You just can't teach that type of this natural talent, and he's got that. Are there areas in his game he needs to grow and figure out, and to be effective every single night in every situation? Yeah, but I think he's going to be a player that, you know, he might see the game a little differently, right? And so there's going to be some unconventional things that you may not necessarily draw up on the whiteboard, but he's going to do, and you know what, he might pull it off, and that's just might be the way he goes. But so impressed with him. I think he's handled, you know, again, like I think it's hard to understate or over, you know, like he was in the USHL, like, you know, not that long ago, and then 1 year of college, you know, injury in his first pro year, AHL, NHL. Like, that is such a rapid ascension for a young defenseman, you know, and it's not easy, and I think he's handled it very, very well, and his development's been really exciting for us, and you know, I think those are discussions we'll have in the offseason of is this a player that's best suited just to go in the NHL and have to figure it out, because a lot of the tools are NHL level. Some, especially game experience and situational experience, he doesn't have that, but you only kind of get that from playing. And could he get that in the American League? Yeah, potentially. But there's also value in him being in this environment and around the players that we have here, and some of the age group that we have here. I think that could be really beneficial to him as well. So, you know, we'll kind of see how the off season goes in some of those discussions, but he's close.
A lot of us on the outside, and even nationally, have said, like, this is the year the Blackhawks can or should go for an elite, like, forward or elite free agent. Do you agree with that? Is that, like, number one on your board?
I don't necessarily agree with that, because I don't think it's like, okay, and this year we're going to do it, and this year we're not. And, like, you're always looking to acquire elite talent when it comes available. It's just, like, it's so much easier to say that, right? And, like, you know, they're probably doing the same thing in every other city, right? Player X could go in and play right there, and wow, that's what they should do, because why not, right? So, you know, I hear it. I don't necessarily, that doesn't impact how we view whether we do, don't, able, not able, you know. We talk about everything. We consider everything. But again, I'll go back to the fact that we have to take care of what we know and what is actionable on our end, and that's our young players. That's our youth, right? We know they're here. We know they're part of this moving forward. We know they're very promising, and we believe they can be very good. And so it's going to be that group that thrusts us into that next level. One player doesn't change everything, and there will be time, whether it's last summer, this summer, moving forward, that, you know what, there is an acquisition of some sort, whether it be free agent or trade, or maybe not. But, you know, in all likelihood, there's going to be a point where we do acquire someone that's going to be, you know, a contributor in a big way. But I just, again, it's so out of our hands in many cases, right? That I can't can't say, yeah, that's what we're going to do this summer, because I just don't know if that's the case. And honestly, in all likelihood, it's not, because that's just the way things go, and how rare it is for players to become available, and then that you get players either in trade or free agency. So, yeah, it's we talk about that stuff all the time. We consider every option, with the understanding that it's probably unlikely, just based on the odds, right? There's all these other teams. Just because people think we should doesn't mean we can or will. And so we consider, we evaluate, and in some cases we try, and doesn't always happen that way. So that's how I view every offseason, not just this one because people say it's time.
Do you have an update on Laurent Brossoit and the kind of the future goaltending for you?
No medical update. I think, when he had the second surgery, I think this time the plan was to take things slow and make sure that it wasn't about getting him back as soon as we could. It was about getting him fully healthy. And so I think that's the track we're on. We're happy about the track he's on. Had some good chats with him lately. It's a tough year. You're a player, you want to be in the fight, and he wasn't able to do that this year. But love his mindset, love his work ethic, and his understanding about the situation, and yeah, just a couple good chats lately with him, and like where he's headed, like where his mindset's at heading in the off season, and hopefully we can get him fully healthy and compete in training camp.
Do you see that as sort of a competition, I guess, with Arvid, or re-signing him, and even Drew, or just?
Yeah. I think it's going to be a competition. I think we'd be fortunate to be in that position because it means LB is healthy. And so that's what we want, and so we want him to come in and compete with the other guys that we've got in the depth chart, and let them take it from there.
You talked about Levchinov's ascent, but certainly Sam Renzel, when you picked him, was pretty rough cut and that diamond in the rough, if you will. With the impacts that you've seen from some of the young guys, how does that line up with what your expectations were? You've been very intentional not put a timeline on this rebuild process, but as far as your expectations and the impact that you've seen from these young guys, is it happening as fast as maybe you hoped, faster, better? How does it line up with what you would, maybe best case scenario, when you started developing this depth chart?
It's tough to say, right? Because first of all, I didn't know Sam was going to come out of Minnesota, Sam specifically, come out of Minnesota or Ollie until the night before they signed, or the night before they showed up at practice. I found out at, I got calls 5:00, right? It wasn't like we knew, 2 months previously that they're coming out, just season has to end, and then we'll get, no, you don't know, right? And so if they go back to school, then, I think the end of the season looks a little bit different. We're probably talking a little bit differently, but that's what I always, when I'd stand up here previously and say, look, I see what's happening under the surface here. I see what's happening, and they're coming. And then, sometimes just because they're not on the NHL ice doesn't mean they're not, very promising, right? And I think we saw that, where we saw Sam, we saw Oliver, we saw Ryan Green, and a number of these other prospects that were coming, and how they're playing, and how they've developed, and what their steps are to being what we think they can be. But it's nice to see them come in and deliver on the expectations and the belief we had in them. Now there's a lot of work left to do, right? We're a long way off. We understand that, but you have to have the talent in your organization to take those next steps moving forward, and we believe we have that. And that's the toughest thing to get, is the young talent, and we've got a lot of it in volume and in quality, and so we're really excited about that. How that looks, again, I didn't really know how it would look for some of these young guys stepping into the NHL. I knew they have the talent, but you just don't know how it's going to work. Just like I don't necessarily know what that next step, what they're going to look like in training camp. Maybe they're taking another step, and then, that's really exciting. And so, but I think the thing that we can be really excited about, and that what I'm really excited about, and our management team is internally, is that we had some young players, and that roster the last couple days, weeks, was really young. And you walk into an environment like Montreal, and you see the guys that they lean in. They didn't wilt, and they leaned in on that environment and played a really damn good game. That's exciting. That's really exciting to know that a playoff type atmosphere, and they rise to that occasion. And you know, some of them haven't even hit, if it's Sam or Oliver, it was their 7th game. Sam's walking into Bell Center in that environment, played 27 minutes. It's crazy, and Frank and Connor and Slags and Ollie and all, there's almost too many to name because there's so many young guys in that lineup, and to play the way they did, you can only be excited about what that means moving forward. Not only just for next season, but in big games when we get into environments like that. Even the Ovechkin game, when he tied Gretzky's record, crazy environment, and we played pretty damn well for the most. They hit another level there in the third, where they're in this, where they are in the standings for a reason, and they're a really great team. But we ended up losing that game. But I think you saw for the better part of 2 periods, we were right in there with them. And then in Montreal, tough start in that crazy environment, and then we came back. It would have been really easy for all these young guys to be like, holy geez, look at this. They're about to clinch a playoff spot, and you know what? Let them have it. What a fun night for them. This is cool. And look around. Didn't do that. They leaned in, made a difference, pulled ourselves back into the game, and almost won in regulation. That's the kind of thing that gives me a lot of juice going into the offseason and excited about where this group's headed. What's
your take on Korchinski and the season he's had? Just not just here, but in Rockford.
Yeah, I think up here, I thought he was good. I think some struggles, but again, I think the thing with Kevin that we forget is that he's a really young defenseman. He was here all last year, so it's easy to forget how old he actually is. And in the traditional sense of development for a lot of defensemen, it takes time, and not everyone's different. Not everyone jumps in and can play right away. Some guys take a couple of years. Some guys they need a year in the minors and then they're good to go. It's always different. And so I think with Kevin or any other defenseman, we're just going to work with them, continue to work with them. We believe in Kevin a ton. He's got a ton of raw talent. He's made some really nice steps in Rockford this year, really nice, and grown parts of his game that he struggled with last year. And so, he's on an upward trajectory. I think, would he have liked to create a little more offensively in Chicago? Would he like to have felt a little bit more steady in his some of his stints here? Yeah, but we've seen, players go up, down, come back, and then you see a guy like Wyatt Kaiser, right? A little bit of the up and down, and finish the season out really strong. And so, Wyatt's older than Kevin, and so it takes time. It just takes time, reps, games, experience. But with Kevin's raw talent and the steps that we've seen from him, we're very excited about where he's going.